Welcome online, new people as well. A few minutes and then we're starting the webinar. 7 minutes exactly. Do we have any presenters online yet? I was wondering if somebody wants to try their presentation, if it works. I guess we don't have yet. Let's wait a few more minutes. Hey, Teele, did you manage to solve the problem why somebody has not got their link? I also just spoke with the Mark speaker and she had not received a link. I'm just wondering if we are having a bigger problem here. The people, hi.
I think, hello Anna, hello everyone. I think I will send from other email. We sent from our official email. Just could we prolong the bit this beginning? Maybe it might help for some. I checked several people they have received, but I also receiving responses that people are not has not received links. So let's try once more. Because I have received, but I also are receiving responses that people are not receiving links. So let's try.
Okay, we can postpone a little bit the beginning if need be. Also, Anna and Indra, I prepared a breakout room, so if need be, we can move there.
Thank you. How do you move there by yourself?
You will just have a message to click and go, or I can move you.
Yeah, I went there already once.
I wasn't there.
Yeah, I noticed. Yeah, okay, we can use it if needed, but I just noticed that there's 3 minutes till we start, and we don't have any speakers here yet, and also not many participants. That's it. do you let people in, Tele? Is there a lot of room in them? A lot of people in the waiting room? Great. We have our first speaker online as well. And GINTARAS, hi, you are muted.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me just well?
So, well, I guess it's time to welcome everybody and start the webinar soon. We're waiting a few more minutes since not everybody got the the link to the Zoom early enough, but I guess in the meanwhile we can say a few more welcome words and then start the presentations a few minutes later. I'm Anna Levonmaa from the Finnish Association of Landscape Architects, and we have a Baltic Sea region webinar starting here, and we have a hosting group from Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland, and everybody's gonna say few words to welcome you all. Maybe now is a good moment for that, to everybody to introduce themselves just with a few words. This is our second session this year with this group, and topic today is very current topic, stormwater management in landscape architecture. So let's start from Estonia.
Hello.
And yeah.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for those welcoming notes. I am Teele Nikola from Estonian Landscape Architects Union, and I am very glad about this topic that we are having today, because I understand the need for this these methods that I hope to hear about today. We have managed so little here in Estonia that we can actually touch with our own hands about the storm management. So I'm eager to hear all the good thoughts and also share what we have done. So welcome. Indra?
Okay, you are giving a word to me. Thank you, dear all participants. I'm really delighted, and it's an honor for our group that you are joining our seminars. We started our Baltic Sea Region Landscape Architecture group in 2017. Please help us remember. And so year by year, we are organizing seminars. At the first time, it was physical. And now, as Anna mentioned, it's a third one that is on digital form. And it gathers more and more participants. And thank you all for being part of this new form of continuous professional education. Welcome. And I'm now giving a word to GINTARAS.
Thank you. Thank you, Indra. Hello, everybody. It's nice to see you all on board. Indeed, we are the group of landscape architecture associations, or people who have initiative in running this training course. And we are doing this under the umbrella of IFLA Europe. I think that this time is very good for discussing sustainable urban drain questions, because we have just had in the Baltic Sea region quite hot summer with several rainstorms, and we have to look how we cope with these issues, having in mind municipalities, the public sector, and also the private owners. So we can listen today to presentations, and you can ask the questions if they are burning, I think, immediately after the presentation, or write them in chat. And also at the end, we will have a panel discussion. Welcome, everybody. So the word goes to Przemysław. Przemysław, dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome from Poland, from city of Kraków. I don't know why, at least I don't see myself in the camera. Everything is engaged, but welcome from wet already. Kraków, we've had like today 25 millimeters of rainfall since early morning. So the topic of today's our small conference is very current, very important. So we will see how to cope, how to deal with different issues associated with rainwater management in urbanized areas. I'm expecting a number of very interesting, fascinating presentations. So welcome all the guests, and of course, congratulations to organizers of our meeting. Let's cross our fingers for smooth run of our meeting. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you all. And then a few words about the agenda. We will have 3 half-an-hour presentations, 10-minute fitness break, and then another 3 half-hour presentations before this panel discussion that GINTARAS just mentioned. And yeah, great. We have such a group of professionals around this topic today, and both like more strategic level discussions, and then actually also pilot projects and more detailed topics. Stormwater management is very current in both national and EU level, and part of many landscape architects' everyday work already. And for some, it's a topic of special expertise, like for our first speaker, Vilja Larjosto. Do you want to, Vilja, start your presentation while I introduce you so that we know that it works?
Yeah, I can try.
Yeah. Vilja Larjosto is a landscape architect, graduated from Finland, Aalto University, and she did her PhD in Germany, and she's really expertising in climate adaptation. And now today the topic is nature-based stormwater management in and around urban streams, which has been on her work table, different urban streams lately. Please welcome Vilja Larjosto. I think we can start your presentation.
Thank you, Anna. And thank you everyone for organizing this event. I was very happy to hear about this kind of collaboration between the countries around the Baltic Sea. And glad to meet you online today. Yeah, so as Anna mentioned, I will also say a little bit about my background. Currently, I'm working at SITOWISE, one of the biggest consulting companies in Finland. But how did I end up with the topic of climate adaptation and stormwater? Was actually through my recent years in Germany. In 2019, I finished a PhD about urban islands. And this picture is from a case study from Malta, which I did about rivers and building resilience on Malta. And especially the rivers were an interesting topic in there because they are actually dry valleys. There are no rivers. There's just heavy rain events in wintertime. So how do you cope with all these events in the small island, which actually had turned most of the rivers to roads or just forgotten backyards and dumps, etc. But they flow through different kinds of landscapes, and they connect very much actually with the topic of stormwater management, because in the heavy rainfall events, there are flash floods at the coastal areas where the rivers have mostly been built up. So this is also how my presentation today is talking about urban streams and stormwater, because these topics link with each other every now and then in my work. So looking at blue networks in the urban areas and talking about climate adaptation, it always more or less comes back to this combination of, for example, rivers or streams in urban areas and the stormwater, how it ends up to these rivers, and then what is the capacity of the rivers or streams and the areas around them to adapt, absorb, be flexible in the case of rain events. And so it all comes to blue-green solutions in urban areas. In a number of projects that I've been working on in the 2 recent years then in Finland. And today I will talk about a river in Espoo, which is also Espoo is part of the Helsinki region, the metropolitan area. And you can see in the right-hand side, it's a river that flows in a very urban setting with different kinds of, there is habitation around it, also industrial areas. And its mouth here, the delta so-called, it comes to a small marina area, and there is also a lot of reeds growing there. And this is actually what is happening more and more. Very often the river flows here under this road and continues towards an industrial area and fields there. But you see this almost yearly now that these flood events are happening and they are actually cutting the streets. very common phenomenon for European cities actually, and I think Finland has been spared mostly from this kind of extreme events until now. But I've been working on 2 projects that are not yet concluded or not yet constructed, but where I'm telling about this process a little bit and our thoughts and solutions that we are thinking about. So I've been involved in the reconstruction of this street design here because we want to raise it a bit higher in order to avoid the flood events. But of course that doesn't actually make anything for the floods, but it just floods less frequently when it's higher. But so we are also working with this whole river area and adding its capacity to adapt to the flood situations or like the extreme rain events, but also because, well, I could actually go back one step because we are in this coastal area close to the coast. So it means that also the sea flood often rises up to almost here where this whole design area is located. So we're working with 2 kinds of water dynamics, and that's why we need space for water around there. But as you can see, when it's flooding around in these different kinds of areas, of course the pollutants and substances from the urban area are also getting into the water. So we would like to avoid that as well in the project. And I will briefly talk about 3 kinds of solutions that we have been designing here. And one strategy is flood meadows, and I'm just titling them flood meadows at the moment because in some cases we design like flood plains around the river, which are directly connected to the main stream. But then in a couple of occasions, we for example, wanted to spare trees that give shadow to the stream. So we separate a floodplain from the main course of the river. And in the case of heavy flood events, the water from the river can also take this other path. So this, in the course of the whole river, there's this effort to maximize the volume for the river's flow capacity. And there are very many challenges concerning not only space, because sometimes it's so tightly built, but also restrictions from the geological points of view. And on the other hand, also in certain areas, there are some natural values that need to be taken into account. But at the same time, we're not just making these canals for maximizing the flood adaptation capacity, but also creating ecological and recreational value. So this is why we're working with these meadows, and our experts are designing certain specific seed mixtures that are suitable for these kind of places. And if we talk about stormwater management, and not only the flood risk and these extreme events, but waters that are coming from the adjacent areas, these kind of flood meadows also retain and help settle the suspended matter before it flows into the river and spreads with the river. So we can also protect the river ecosystem a little bit that way by filtering stormwater from adjacent areas. Another, I would say, innovation in Finland, because these haven't been constructed very much, and these 2 images are from another pilot project. They are not from this project. In this project, we would build it a little bit differently, and I think actually, at least I know in Estonia, there is much more expertise on using reed as in different ways for also like landscape construction. And in this river project, we also want to apply the circular economy, because at the mouth of the river, at the delta, as I mentioned, there is reed growth that is also blocking the flood volume a little bit, or the flows of the river. So it needs to be while we're also digging or dredging the delta a little bit, we could reuse the reed in the course of the stream. And in some places we might use it as an erosion protection, but this particular structure here that I'm referring to is rather meant for the stormwater filtering as well. And our experts have been also involved in this separate pilot project for this kind of reed filter. So what you see here, the reed is just being stacked in front of this pipe that brings the stormwater from, let's say, from the constructed area nearby or around. And you need some, this is a construction that was just made at a test site with whatever materials were available. So probably we will shape it a bit differently, but this is the idea, that you need also some weight on it so that it stays. And actually it would be also interesting to hear if you have experiences from your countries with this kind of structures, reuse of the reed, because in the pilot research that was done in the project, it also helps to retain suspended matter and nutrients as well. From we're using it here from, because it's a pilot, and we are also, like, the municipality hasn't been working with reed, so they agreed that we would test it in a couple of locations along the stream, especially in areas where the stormwater flows come from traffic surfaces and these light industrial areas. So you have a lot of surface where also these pollutants or unwanted matters would end up in the river. I'm seeing a message in the chat. Is there? Okay, there's just Anna's message too. You can ask questions. And the third solution, or third kind of approach that we are also using in this project, this is rather, this is in connection with the road or the street design. You can see the street that I showed, the flooding street here. And there, the most important function for these bioswales is not to control the volume of water or the quantity of water, but the quality of stormwater before it flows into the stream. So what we are applying here is this idea of bioswales on both sides of the streets. And the idea here is to help to absorb or filter nitrogen and dissolved metals and phosphorus, and so that it wouldn't go to the stream. But also at the same time, we wanted to take this a little bit further by introducing dynamic vegetation to these swales, because we're also working with the image of the vegetation in the street as in probably traditional or normal business as usual urban streets. You have grass or lawn and some bushes and trees. So here we are working more with meadows as well, so taller grass vegetation. And from here also the idea for the bioswales that we could use dynamic vegetation. I will explain it a little bit more, because it contributes not to the ecology of the street, but also to a certain new idea of the visual landscape in the street. So first, for the materiality, or how do we plan to, because this is not yet constructed, so we have finalized the designs and of course discussed everything with the client and technical experts. So the idea in this, there is on both sides of the vehicle traffic lane, there are these bioswales, and their structure is composed of mostly sand, because it increases the mobility and the filtering of water, but also because we need to minimize the fine aggregates, because it reduces the risk of freezing. And this is a constant discussion, at least in our heights, that in winter these structures might freeze, or in springtime the structures might be frozen while still there is another large volumes of water coming from the melting snow, etc. So the goal for the materiality here is for the filtering, but also considering the minimizing of the freezing effects here. And there's an overflow system, because this one here is the one in the middle of the street, but in the end it needs to go towards the stream that is on the left side here. So if it overflows, also it won't flow to the street, but it would go underneath towards the stream. And thus we cannot maybe control everything in case of very extreme events, because we were limited by the measurements of the street, etc. But at least it will make a better situation in a let's say more sort of frequent regular rainfall events. And what comes to the vegetation, dynamic vegetation, if you are not familiar with the term, maybe you are familiar, but I just briefly repeat the principles of dynamic vegetation. So it means a multi-species, multi-layered planting that mimics nature, because the idea is that it's diverse, it's resilient in the way that it is adaptive to different conditions depending on weather, and then also part of the maintenance. In the beginning, it needs maintenance in order to establish the wanted species, and for example, in this case, not letting bushes or trees start growing in these bioswales. But the final idea is that you don't control the amount of a certain species afterwards, but you rather let it develop by itself in its natural balance, and see how the species take space there. Of course, then later on you can manage the species a little bit if it starts to become too monotone, that one of the species takes over the whole area. But this is the idea of a dynamic vegetation, that it adapts to the site conditions and it's mixed and diverse from the setting. But in this case, for the bioswales, I was just explaining about the sandy structure with very little organic matter in the substance, in the soil where these plants are going to be planted. So in addition, also there's these requirements that they need to be salt tolerant because of the salt that is spread on the streets in Finland in wintertime. This is something that stresses streetscape vegetation quite a lot. So these plants needed to be tolerant of salt, also heat, as we are getting more and more hot summers and droughts, but also then this occasional flooding, or that there is water staying in these swales. And also tolerant, able of growing in this nutrient poor and pervious soil. And we are also looking for species, or it would be very favorable also to have these species that are especially efficient in fixation of phosphorus and nitrogen. And what comes to the roots, the structure, the physical structure of the plants, also we needed plants that have roots that are going deep, but also spreading laterally, like branching, like rhizomes, but not too tight tufting like some grasses, because that would prevent the water that comes to the swale from filtering. That would sort of close the structure. But what we want is that the roots keep the structure very pervious or permeable, so that there is this space for the water to function and the filtering to function. And that the plants, we seek the ideal situation that the plants would cover the surface quite quickly and evenly, so that the water when there's a lot of water, it stays and flows quite evenly on this whole surface. And I already mentioned some of the design challenges that we had. We are still to see how this functions, because they are not yet built. But the challenges were especially in the beginning, also in the estimating the volumes and the performance during wet and dry times. For example, our client was concerned about whether there will be vegetation whether they will be too large so that there will never be water on them because they had experiences from some other projects. So calculating for what kind of rain events do we make the measure for these, how much would the vegetation actually take place in the structure, etc. But we tried to do our best, of course, and also make effort in that we choose such plants that will thrive in these different climate or weather situations. I think actually the biggest challenge than that, it was the limited vertical and horizontal space, because it was in this structure. It's a V-shaped structure, so actually the depth is also very determining in how deep can we dig there, what kind of structures, because there's also other infrastructures around and the street itself. So we had these kind of narrow and long structures to trying to optimize the depth and the structure of these swales was also one of the challenges. So as early on as possible, it's also good to discuss about the space that these kind of structures may need, because it might be very obvious and there are regulations for the needs and safety distances and isolation, etc. of certain infrastructures, but these are new structures, the bioswales, and they are not, you cannot measure their performance and capacity as absolutely as some gray infrastructure. So it's good to discuss about the need of space and try to secure it as early as possible in the process. And as I mentioned, the anticipated challenges after construction also might be the winter conditions, whether they will freeze and how do they function after that, what kind of weather conditions there will be, but also snow plowing, because it might be a very attractive place, this sort of lower empty space along the street, to just, when you plow the streets, you can just see that this is a good space to put snow, but actually then it of course hinders the performance of the bioswales, because the snow takes time to melt and then they're not functioning in springtime when they would be needed. So it might be factors that make the functionality slower or lower, and we will see how it works. And maintenance, low resources, the client municipality emphasized they have low resources, so they cannot do very intensive care and maintenance in these, but actually there should be a special program for maintenance that the early first or 2 years are very carefully taken care of, because after that the vegetation will sort of take care of itself. So these were some of the concerns that we thought about, but we have had a very, very good expert team in designing these and talking about the solutions. So I also appreciate a lot this kind of collaboration between stormwater experts, between infrastructure experts. Also the client has very good points to add to us and our team. We have this ecological landscape design team, so we have experts on dynamic vegetation and soils. So we have put our best knowledge together for the design. And I'm finishing my presentation here because I thought maybe if you have some questions I understood that we have a discussion in the end, but maybe if there are some questions for specific understanding questions about the project or the presentation, feel free to ask something.
Great, thank you. Now it's time for a few quick questions. I'm checking if anybody's raising their hands. There's no questions in the chat. I could ask one. One question of mine was actually about the multidisciplinary team, but you answered it already. That's great. And one thing I was wondering if you had a ecologist as well in the team when it comes to like fish and the river ecology? And
yeah, we had like we had a sub-consultant who was making the report about the nature values before, or like in the beginning of the project around the river, and then he's also been available through the design process. Every now and then we have asked about certain things, especially how to construct these more natural streams and river courses. And then what comes to vegetation, we in our team there's also biologists.
right. And there's actually a question here by Alex asking, can you name please examples of plants that are useful for bioswales in Finland?
I will go backwards to the slide with the plant pictures. And that's something, I'm not the plant expert and I have the planting list, but we don't know yet if these, I mean, we suppose that these are suitable plants. So we looked actually from natural plants very much, this kind of very modest plants. And these are the different plants, but I don't know their name in their scientific name. So I don't know if it's helpful to start naming plants in Finnish, and I think each site has their own characteristics. But we also try to add, because our expert on dynamic vegetation also knows a lot about these butterfly plants, etc. So they really knew to pick also a little bit more rare species and native species to the selection, so that we can also, in that sense, not only find the plants that survive there, but also to find plants how we can support the sort of maintaining more rare native species if they are available and to be found.
Thank you. And then there's another question, if there's a few more, actually now I got them. How do you determine the positioning of the meadows, where it starts and where it ends? I guess the measurement is the key question here.
Yeah. How do we measure? I don't have our design map here actually, but it's, if I understood the question correctly, I'm just skipping back to this question, sorry, the slide. We have, of course, a map, the design site plan of the whole drawing. So there were always these, they are actually quite well defined. And then we looked at the mean water levels and the high water level. So that the size of the meadows comes from the hydraulic modeling, from the modeling of the different flood frequencies, how much more or less we should need in volume, in capacity. And then together with the water experts, we have made these shapes where we have always, the slopes are like 1 to 3 because of the maintenance, because the maintenance is done by machines, and this is a recommendation. So we have this slope, and then we have the adjacent surface that is here in this section. It's adjacent to the main water body, main stream. But here, as I said, this other one is separate, but it has these 1 to 3 slopes, and there's a certain size calculated for it. And about the meadow, below the mean water level, we are not planting anything. And then above the mean water level, we have a direct sowing of a certain mix of meadow seeds. And this is anticipated to be the humid, the sort of wetland meadow. And then from above the high water level, we propose planting a different seed mixture. So it's for more dry meadow, but of course it's just a limit in the picture, but then it will adapt to the site conditions and probably the species. But how we define the meadow is also about maintenance. So then there will be a maintenance map where you draw the lines where is which area is to be cut how many times per year. And for these flood meadows, actually the ones that are adjacent to the stream, they are envisioned that there is actually no cutting of these. You don't go here with the machines to these humid, wet meadows, but you just need to take off the plants like bushes and trees that would start growing there, because you need to maintain the volume for water. But then above here, there's a certain frequency for the maintenance. So there are different maintenance classes for different kinds of meadows.
There was one more. There's the next presentation getting ready as well. There's a question about if there's additional maintaining cost for dynamic vegetation solution because of the plants. You mentioned already about the few years in the beginning, and then.
Yeah, we haven't calculated it, but we also always highlight it to the client that in the first 2 years they should be more intensively taken care of. So in that sense, I would calculate or guess that there is more intensive cost for the maintenance, but then again in the longer run it will compensate, because you don't need to replace plants. Probably you don't need to sort of keep it always looking like the same, that here is this plant, here is the other plant, and when it's mixed you need to sort of re-establish the whole planting. So we don't have the risk that the planting dies completely because we use different species. So
we have good experiences as well from the city of Tampere doing dynamic vegetation areas, and if you also plant very densely, then you have of course less weeds in between and less maintenance. I wanted to ask you one more thing, because you mentioned that in the bioswales you use sand as filter. Have you have any pilots or projects with other materials like biochar or leca gravel or?
No, I haven't been in these projects because I've been in the house for 2 years, and I've mainly done these projects that take very long time. So I haven't had experiences so much from the construction material details of other projects.
Yeah, these are something that we are testing, but it would be good to have data from and compare them, which is the best filter material.
But I don't know the exact reasons, but I know in an adjacent street to this one, the biocharcoal was used, and then the client or our experts did not want to use it in this project. So
okay, that's why
now opting for sand.
Thank you very much for the interesting presentation and the good discussion afterwards. And now actually we are perfectly on time, and we welcome the next speaker. I think it's going to be GINTARAS, even though we had someone else. Do I have the right schedule? That just confirm me, because I had again getting ready there. GINTARAS, is it you next? Can I present you?
Yes, okay. Please.
Thank you. And our next speaker is GINTARAS STAUSKIS from the Department of Urban Design, Vilnius Technical University. He's an architect, an urban designer, and a professor. And his topic today is successful implementation in sustainable urban drainage systems. Welcome, GINTARAS.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for a nice introduction. And let me share my presentation. Hope you can see it well and you can hear me well. So it's nice that we take this topic of sustainable urban drain, which seems important and well known, and it was very interesting to see the Finnish experience. How do you do there? How do you implement these systems in Finland? What we notice in Lithuanian cities that it is still a challenge, and still it's very difficult to persuade municipalities and some private clients to mount on the system and to implement it in their projects, both public and private. So I will touch several aspects. I will mention recent challenges even they are known, but we can look on them again. I will mention the experience from the past, how this was managed in the past. It's very interesting to see that. Then I will focus on the mission and functions of sustainable urban drain system and look on a couple of projects, on the retention pond project and a case design with the calculation of volumes in one single family house project. So we have had floods forever, probably, but only recently we have become so sensitive, because when floods are somewhere in a countryside, so they are absorbed and they're taken naturally. But when that happens on the main street in the city, so that's a big adventure, and people are making pictures and putting them on sites and admiring what is happening. So each time when we have this flood, we have titles in our newspapers and on internet that municipalities don't take care of the rain sewage systems, and they don't care of the infrastructure in the city. So maybe mayor has to look again and again on that. So you can see that similar pictures we have from the 30s and 40s in the 20th century, and similar pictures we have today.
Gintaras,
Yes.
could you please switch to the full screen?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Indra.
Thank you, Gintaras.
Yeah, we have had some extremely dangerous places in the city, and that were after all, there were a big investment done, and reconstructing, as you see, 1.2 kilometer pipeline renewal costed 5 million euros to the city. This was a strange low area on a motorway in the city, and it was flooded after each more dramatic rain. So as we see, that is very costly to make these mistakes, and it makes a big investment and big costs for the city, which means also for all the residents. It's very interesting to observe how water was used in historic manners. Actually, we see that probably the swampy areas and wetlands and wet places were the places of primary selection for these historical manners, because then modeling these ponds was the major attraction in historic manners. What we see in the city, in Vilnius city, we had also a historic tradition how these rainstorms, how they were managed in old time, when we did not possess the high industries and abundant finances. Even they are sometimes very limited. So on the right-hand side, you see the picture of the missionaries convent in Vilnius city, where at the low part of the site, the monks, when they settled in Vilnius in the 16th century, they have excavated the ponds, and these ponds were used not as a retention ponds to accumulate rainwater that was flowing down from the slopes. Also, the fish was breeded in these ponds. There's an interesting picture how in the old town Vilnius, probably you can recognize the street, it's Aušros Vartų street in the Vilnius old city, how rainwater was managed with a slight curve on the side of the street. And then I have a picture from one German company that is advertising exactly the same solution for the residential areas nowadays. It looks very similar for me. So if we go and look on the mission of the sustainable urban drain system, what is it used for and what can it do for us? So firstly, we have to manage runoff quantity and quality. The quantities of runoff water have become a major issue for urban areas, because they have a very short duration and they have very high amount. And this is very difficult to manage in traditional ways when we dispose rainwater under the ground into the rainwater sewage pipeline. Also, rainwater quality is an issue, because when the rain is flowing in urban areas, so it carries all the dust and all the oils and other harmful particles with it. The other important thing is biodiversity. We know that when there is no water, there is no life, actually. We can say that water is one of the preconditions for plants, and also consequently for species, for different fauna and other forms of life in the area. So if you want more diversity, we should resolve the question of watering. It's sometimes very strange to see that firstly we are draining the water and then we are watering the areas. And of course, last but not least, sustainable urban drain allows us to create better places for nature, firstly, because of higher biodiversity, and better places for people. When these places are more attractive, they don't have a heat island effect and other problems. We still hear sometimes that rainwater, is it an inspiration or is it an obstacle? And we hear this said by some professionals when they are not completely familiar, not with the problem, but probably with the ways how to resolve it. And I have this very simple plan and section of a pond on the left-hand side, and you can see that there is a deeper part and there is a more shallow part. So you can design a water pond that is changing depending on the amount of rainfall. So I think that it's really an additional tool for architectural design and for planning the areas. And for landscaping, you can even have the dynamic and changing landscapes. On the right-hand side, you can see very simple solution in planning a parking area, which in most of the projects, it's a gray patch in the project that we just have to design because it's needed and nothing more. But if we design a water flow system on it, it can become a very attractive part of our project. Sustainable urban drain is also part of a sustainability pathway. In different sustainability assessment systems, in the international systems, in different regions of the world, we see that these issues are very highly ranked, and they affect of up to 1/3 of the total assessment of the sustainability of the building. So these aspects address site reuse, they address regulating and water flow, and also management, also selecting the local species of plants and watering the plants, and also monitoring the whole process. Water is also a very important resource system in city. So it's a natural resource that has certain subsystems, streams and river lakes, embankments, and groundwater aquifers. And it's also the infrastructure subsystem, which has systems built by people, that are introduced by people. These are channels, wells, dams, and purifying equipment. Water also solves the social economic needs of people, because it is an important part of human life and human activities. We know that the places that have water, they are very attractive, and people are very often visiting them. And on the contrary, the dry places are not so attractive. Also, we need some regulatory system for the way water is used and it is disposed. And we know that using the water is still, maybe it is still not a very big challenge in Lithuania, for example. We use most of drinking water in our cities from the deep underground water bores, but many countries and many cities now already experience water scarcity. So sustainable urban drain can resolve different functions. Firstly, it is a big subsistence system for local communities, meaning drinking water and using it for irrigation and fishing. It's also used by industry for commercial use, for hydropower plants and other equipment. And also it's an environmental regulation and non-consumptive use of water is very important when we have to purify, use it for recreation and tourism and public space, and also for composing landscapes. Ecological value of water is another important point, and it lets us create pools and nature conservation solutions. So the major elements of sustainable urban drain system are probably well known. And these simple childish pictures show how we can start managing the system from a very technical solution, which happens in the parking when you have to manage the runoff of these huge areas in the parking site. So instead of accumulating them in big quantities and then disposing in an underground rainwater sewage system, we can collect them in a small channels called swale, and then these channels could lead to a little bit bigger channel, and then they could be sent to ponds, including retention ponds, and finally to open water sources like lakes and rivers, and finally get into the sea. In Vilnius city, we have the whole system of water features, and they are functioning very well. I mean, natural water features. As you see on the left-hand side map, there is a terrain map of Vilnius city area, which is actually very big. It's almost equal to that of the Paris city, and as you know, Singapore is just double size as Vilnius city area. So we see that in Vilnius city we have Neris and Vilnia, two rivers that are dominating the whole terrain map, and the adjacent areas have the very good situation in terms of disposing of the rainwater. Neris River Valley is one of the major public areas in the city center, and even in 1970 there were very interesting projects that were actually not realized until the end. You see on the left hand side the drawing design which was designed by architects and landscape architects when they were designing hotel and shopping complex there, and they thought about collecting rainwater and designing such an attractive public space with a pedestrian bridge over the river. So this was not built, and unfortunately now we just have a huge lawn, which is also attractive place, and it's very preferred by people. And on the left hand side you can see the model of recent architectural development when the new high-rise buildings are introduced in the Vilnius business center, but the management of rainwater is still quite a secondary question in this extent. We have another interesting project in Gulbinai. Gulbinai is an area adjacent to Vilnius city. It's pretty close to the city. And owners and investors in this project, they came into the problem when they tried to resolve the question of rainwater management in a conventional way. This means pumping it with the underground pipes to the central purification station, because the area, on one hand, it was very big, it was a large area, and it had a double inclination. The western side was inclined to the west, and the eastern side was inclined to the west, to the east. So it turned out to be that the infrastructure systems to manage this in a conventional, I would say, in an artificial way, became very costly, and this has almost undermined the whole project. So after looking for some solutions and finding them, finally they designed a natural water flow system. You can see that they started with a big master planning, and they designed swales between the land plots when the water from the private land plots should be disposed into smaller channels, and then gradually lead to the bigger infrastructure systems. On the right hand side you can see the map that shows that the system also allows to create very nice water features on the surface of the ground where they have never existed, and indeed this creates a very attractive living environment for people who really feel a huge attraction for water. Sometimes, very often, on weekend, they drive to the lake or to the pond and they have their leisure time there. But instead of that, they can have this just across their front door and have it very close to their living place. So all in all, after huge changes in the project and looking for new solutions, finally, they have created a very attractive and very attractive project and very attractive business proposal also on the real estate market. And these are some of the pictures how this is expected to look in a close future. We have some projects and some attempts in Vilnius city to cope with rainwater, and one of the projects was designed in a place which was frequently flooded, and there were hardly any other means to cope with that. So Vilnius city enterprise, which is responsible for caring for the city, they have developed a project of a retention pond, and firstly they identified the area from which they will be managing the rainwater. So you see it on the left-hand side map. In this map, you can see the power of water, which we all know very well, that it's very strong and it can shovel all the lids from the underground pipes like a toy, and it becomes also quite dangerous for people. So the place for this retention pond was chosen in a hilly area. You see the purple line, it's a disposal line where rainwater is running down by the pipe. And then in the midway, they planned such a pond that could keep for a certain moment when the rain is very heavy. They keep the water, retain it for a certain time, and then slowly absorb it and dispose. You can see also how this project looks visually. It's not just infrastructure system, but it's also creating an attractive public space with a big square, as you see in the middle. So this big square is a filtering zone and a water feature in front of us, and some other sitting area on the left-hand side, and accessible for biking and pedestrians. And probably it will be a very nice place for Vilnius city residents. You can see the section, how the slopes of this retention pond were designed. So one by one, the slopes are the gravel and the sand, gravel and sand, gravel and sand, compressed gravel and sand. So I would like to show now one experiment with a very simple, it seems that very simple situation, managing rainwater in a single family house plot. It's not just about nice design, but it's also about knowing the real quantities and the ways we cope with that. So I just took quite an ordinary private housing site. As you see, there is a house. There is some parking area, which is paved with hard pavement, and there is some green space. Firstly, I took the conventional materials that are usually used by people who don't care anything about sustainable urban drain. And then the other option was introducing, and then I calculated how this whole thing looks and what balance do we have. So the option B included a swale on the site, and option C included a retention pond. So you can see that finally, when I introduced those both elements, the first case with a conventional solution was 228 cubic meters in 12 hours from one single family house plot. You can imagine what quantities we might have if we have 10 or 20 plots like this. The other option was just changing the material, not introducing any new elements, just using more water permeable materials like gravel instead of asphalt, or permeable asphalt instead of a conventional asphalt, and using meadow instead of a lawn, instead of a cultural lawn. And the third option was introducing swale and a retention pond. So you can see that even a simple change of materials reduces the runoff dramatically, and introducing an additional water management elements like swale and retention pond even makes it less than zero. This means that all the water is absorbed on site. So some solutions are indeed very simple, and we can just admire why we don't install them, why don't we do them. As you see, making a simple cut in a curb and elevating the driving way and not the green part of the site allows us to dispose rainwater on these little clutches of ground where it could successfully water the plants and be absorbed by the land. Another very simple situation when we have a parking area designed under the residential block. So we have runoff water anyway, we have runoff water from the roof, so we have it from the parking site. We can easily dispose it to the side, and with this very simple, of course, the trees are very, very young here, they are very new, but you can see that probably in 3 or 5 years, this will be a sort of a very attractive and green space. So instead of having a problem, we can have very nice places. Of course, we have to manage the to kill the stream of the running water, because it could be very erosive and it can be very dangerous also for eroding the areas. So stones, natural stones, cut stones, or natural round stones are very good for that. There are interesting projects created in China by AIDA's company, when the public space is planned as could be adjusted for temporary flooding. You can see that the middle of this public space could be temporarily flooded for several hours, and at that time people could even be away, or they sit on the sides, on the terraces, and during that time the water could be absorbed but naturally go to the ground. So I have several conclusions. We can see that SUDS is not just a technology, but it also gives multiple functions. It meets the public needs. It should be, of course, the good solutions should be planned because they should be connected. It opens for us possibility to use local materials and local plants. And of course, it's very good to talk and very good to share our experience when we can see what is happening in different countries. So for the end, I have a final comment that we should see water as a process, as a moving thing. And I will share now with you another short movie. Let me do that to see how water is changing and how is it flowing through the area. One moment. I have to stop sharing here. I stop sharing this presentation. I will share another one. Yes. So please have a look on this interesting model, what the water stream is doing when it's flowing and when it's running. There are certain principles of hydrodynamics, and we should know when we design swales and streams what can happen. And water has a huge power. It could break the shores and it could carry the pavements away. So this requires a bit understanding the whole hydrodynamic processes. It's very interesting. Just follow this interesting movie, which is I think modeled by students with their teachers, and you can see how the water stream is changing its line. You see that certain parts of the perimeter of the stream are disappearing under the water. So of course, this is much faster in nature. It happens more slowly, but the processes are very similar, and certain parts of land appear to be under the water. When there is an obstacle in the water, so the water is going around and it's eroding additional perimeters. We have had similar situation in Vilnius city with Neris River, when it had a round curve in several hundred years ago, and then the river was cutting straight after eroding its bank, and now we have the old or ancient riverbed area with the remnants of the river flow. So we have some ponds at this area, and it's a very attractive area for green spaces. But sometimes you also have big pressure from the businesses, and they want to develop this area. So this is an additional challenge for city planning, when we have to keep still our wetlands and our treasures. Thank you.
Thank you, Gintaras. Yeah, shifting river landscapes are more resilient as well than the ones that are stable. There's a nice architectural landscape architectural book about Mississippi River shifting landscape. I can recommend that. Now we have a few minutes for questions for Gintaras' presentation. There was one already on the chat room. I'm not sure if it was already answered. I think it was concerning the single family house example you gave us, Gintaras?
Yeah,
And the question one, what was the third version?
Yeah, the first version was a conventional design without paying any attention to water permeability or water management. The second version was changing the materials to more water permeable. And the third version was with installing a swale and the retention pond. Right.
Yeah, so the answer was right as well. And I'm interested in to hear that how you talked about a lot of Vilnius different systems and city urban systems, but what is not clear to me is that how much you have actually still in your city still mixed sewage and stormwater systems, or do you have separate already? I guess in the old city you have mixed still. That's very common in the European old cities, but is it a new trend to build different drainages for stormwater?
The regulation requires that it shouldn't be mixed. There should be separate systems, but sometimes in the old town we have such situations when there is no way to have additional rainwater sewage. So then it's allowed for small quantities to be in a mixed flow. We still have this.
Right. And do we have any more questions for Gintaras? Is those water systems sustainable urban drain systems in Vilnius, its background in law? Yeah, that's what you or in spatial planning, maybe in your construction and planning act, or
you know, several years ago, the project of Gulbinai residence was for a long time under discussion in our environmental agency, which didn't find a legal background to approve this project. They said it's not written in our regulation. But of course, now we have changed this regulation. It is still not required. It's still not a must to manage rainwater in a sustainable way. So we are in a very dramatic transition period when some specialists who know this and they advertise this very much and they offer their assistance, but still there are other groups that are used to work conventionally. But I see very good shifts in our, let's say, water management company that is creating such experimental projects. And I hope that in next years, we will have more and more of sustainable solutions in this extent.
That's good news. Thank you, Gintaras, and we'll welcome the next speaker, Gen Mandre, if I know how to pronounce your name. Welcome. Gen is a landscape architect and expertise on sustainable solutions for stormwater management, and he has been part of different projects, EU level projects as well, and the national projects as an expert. Please tell us more and welcome.
Hello everyone. Yeah, my name is Ken. You were pronouncing it properly. Today, I want to tell you about the project I'm involved right now. It's called Development of Sustainable and Climate Resilient Urban Stormwater Management Systems for Nordic Municipalities. I haven't said that long name for a long time. Shortly, it's Urban Storm, Live Urban Storm. To me, it's like a long-cooked bun, I would say, that is very sweet because I've been trying to promote sustainable drainage systems in Estonia, I would say, for a quite long time. Previous speakers already explained natural rainwater solutions and need for them, but repetition is the mother of the wisdom. So very briefly about urban planning and sustainable drainage systems. The drawing you can see when cities began to develop, the first water impermeable surfaces in the form of roofs and hard coverings were built in the middle of the green fields. Basically, first impermeable dots started to spread. Now, the current modern city is so densely developed that there is no place to put all rainwater in case of heavy rainfall because of huge amount of hard surface we have in the cities. We are in a situation where we have to start making those holes, green spots in the water impermeable covers, so that rainwater can infiltrate into the soil. Over here, we have two photos. One of them is from Urban Stormwater study trip to Denmark, and the upper one is roughly modified to describe the situation of what our urban space would be like if we move forward as we have designed cities so far in many cities in my mind. I may be too harsh, but I think we should plan and design cities a little bit differently than we are used to. If you follow the example of cities where sustainable stormwater solutions have already been adapted, our cities can look like lower photo, like in Denmark, for example. The biggest problems in promoting I have faced are mainly old habits. It is very easy to do everything as we are used to, but with a growing and more dense urban environment, we have to change our ways. Lack of awareness, of course, fear of testing new solutions. What if something goes wrong? Who's going to take the responsibility? But with the bold decisions and adapting sustainable drainage systems, we get pleasant living environment. Everybody likes to live in nice and social areas, so that raises the prices of the real estate in that area where the solutions have been adapted. And at a nice living area, people find more activities and spend more time outside. Plus, examples have shown that greener and more social areas bring down criminal activity. I think the most important part of the project is that in the frames of the project, test sites were built in Estonia, and feedback and knowledge gathered during the project will be shared with the municipalities, designers, and public. Challenge is the awareness and habits, as I already mentioned. The objective is to make sustainable drainage systems a daily part of the planning and design process. Shortly about the project, the lead partner is the same municipality where the test sites were built. Project takes place 4.5 years roughly, and the budget is about 2 million euros. So what we have done since, there are very many deliverables, all of which will be put together in the handbook. That is mainly orientated to decision makers, planners, designers, and developers. You are more welcome to find out more about from the link you can see at the slide. So far, there is a report of legislation and standards, financial model of stormwater fee for municipalities, strategy and action plan for the climate change adaptation for Tallinn, our capital, and Viimsi, the municipality where the test sites are. And for 4 two-day training sessions for altogether 60-80 persons on stormwater management systems will take place very soon. Now shortly about the test sites, most exciting part, at least to me. About 15 hectares of the land have improved resilience to flooding as a result of development of Viimsi sustainable drainage solutions in 2 pilot areas. And those are Viimsi Manor Park and Randvere Street parking lot. Thanks to that, we can already tell that number of stormwater emergencies decreased in Viimsi quite a bit. And now shortly about the test sites. aim of Manor Park test area was to use different measures in order to reduce speed of water runoff and create areas for detention patients. 6 different measures were used. Also, existing ditch was cleaned and bushes were cut down. Old existing ditch was made wider and different species of plants were planted. So shortly about all those 6 different techniques that were used. When you see the plan at the left upper corner, the water enters to the ditch, and right away stormwater enters to where the stormwater enters to the ditch. As the arrows show on the map, the stepping stones are placed first in order to reduce water speed. The stones also help to enrich the water with oxygen, and larger stones create path for moving across the ditch. The next would be small waterfall. In this section, the ditch was quite steep, and due to the fast flow and steep slope, erosion also occurred. The waterfall make the longitudinal profile of the ditch flatter. The extended section, next section after the waterfall, is followed by the steeper section of the rapids, which creates a pleasant water splashing sound for the visitors of the park resting on the wooden platform, which is the next technique. In terms of the advantages mentioned earlier, the platform and the ends of the ditch are strategic places where the people's awareness is raised, and explanatory information boards are installed over there. Different crossings will definitely make the ditch more playful and exciting. The dam expands the water level around the platform, and at the same time offers the opportunity to sit on the platform from both sides of the ditch. Adapting rainwater solutions to the park also brought more visitors and made it more popular, which was one of the goals of the design as well. And the second test site is Randvere street parking lot. There is a huge demand for parking spaces in Haapnieme. From stormwater perspective, parking lot is a problem. Basically large non-permeable surface. And this is exactly why we built one parking lot. I would say parking lots are one of the main hard covers in the city scale. And over there, 3 different surface covers were tested. They are drainage asphalt, paving stone with the gaps between, and grass stone. Each material has its own drainage system underneath, so they are separated from each other, as you see on the bigger plan from the top view. So basically, yeah, each of them has the different drainage system underneath to measure how fast and how much water infiltrates through those materials. Driving area in the middle of parking lot is made from asphalt. Asphalt is made of reused plastic. Over time, we gather data about how different surface covers work and where they should be used in our climate. The data is collected if you see 3 wells here, here, and here. Each well is for each material, basically, and in the well there is data collecting system which gives us all the information. And I think very important is to share that information. So information boards have been installed to the test areas, which give people knowledge about what makes the area special and what to draw attention to. Thanks to the information boards and articles published in the local newspaper, we will increase the number of residents of Viimsi municipality who are considering alternatives to the usual stormwater management solutions on their plot as well. And shortly, in 5 years' time, we hope to increase people's awareness and interest towards these solutions, and hope to see more similar sites built to make our cities sustainable and climate resilient. Thank you. Please visit our project homepage, and in case of questions or great ideas, please use the contacts below, and I'll try to answer you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your nice presentation.
Thanks.
Let's wait now for questions. Who wants to ask something? Who wants to ask again? Let's see in chat. Yes. While people are thinking, I have a question. Is it international or national project that you just presented?
It's national.
National.
Yes.
Yeah, it looks like you are addressing the issues that are really, if not global, so international, or at least important to Baltic Sea region. So it would be good to share your experience as long as the project advances, and then especially to see the conclusions and your findings, because it has a research element in it.
Definitely. I'm not 100% sure at the moment how much data we already have collected, but awareness is rising. This is exactly what I'm connected straightforward with, and as I mentioned, those articles and people's awareness, yes, it's growing already, and people are aware, and which is awesome, at least to me, is that Viimsi municipality is so eager to collaborate, and they are, as much as I know, they are already doing some other projects and adapting SUDS in those. For example, the street where the parking lot is, they are renovating it, and they already have several ideas where to place SUDS solutions, which is very, very nice.
Yeah, very good. I think that many listeners who are now connected are thinking how we could advance these processes that municipalities, especially the public sector, boards on such a projects and goes into them. What do you think? What is your opinion? How to motivate them? And the other question would be, what type of specialists are taking part in your project?
I personally hope to involve all the main parties, like decision makers, first of all, municipality representatives, then designers, planners, even builders, because they have to know what they are building. If they build it wrongly, the system won't work, and it's a problem. And how to say, more popularize it. I think the best way in Estonian scale, at least myself, fingers crossed, I'm hoping that Viimsi municipality will be, how to say, like example, and everybody, because Viimsi is situating next to Tallinn. Tallinn is our capital, so very close. And I really, really hope if that project goes well, Tallinn will learn something from there, and the other municipalities as well. So yeah, and the other countries, as I'm presenting today, I hope you all contact us, and we can share our learnings.
Very good, Gen. If you could just comment what type of specialists are taking part in your project to look on this multiple issue.
For example, myself, I'm a landscape architect, then universities. When I go back to the partners, which is in the beginning, sorry.
You have public partners from municipalities, yeah?
We have a partner from basically roughly Tallinn city, then municipality of Viimsi, University of Life Sciences, and give me a sec. Oh, I passed now. And Baltic Environmental Forum Estonia. So it's very Estonian centered, but all the partners have connections everywhere else abroad, and I think through that all the information will spread.
Okay, and we have one question in chat about the impact, and the question is, do you measure the water quality from the parking area? And I would ask also, are you going to measure the financial benefit of this activity?
Good news, I can already tell you a little bit about the price of construction, which is exactly in that case, in case of that certain parking lot, the construction cost is basically the same as construct the regular parking area. And I think what may change the cost would be plants, all the plants. So yeah, if you use a lot of plants, then it will raise the price of the solutions. About measuring the water quality, yes, we are doing it. It's one of the issues at the moment. All the materials separated with I don't know how to call it in English, the membrane, which doesn't let the water through to interpret into the ground. So there is no danger that if the water is really polluted, it will end up in the groundwater or something like that. But yeah, we are doing it, and at the moment I don't know what are the results, but in a year I'm quite sure we have already some answers.
Very good. We will be expecting to hear about your results indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again. So we have now a fitness break. Let's move a bit, and now we have 3:30, so let's come back in 3:40. Let's have a break. So welcome back, everybody. Our next speaker is Jurijs Kondratenko from Latvia, and he will present a very interesting topic about the Latvian experience with sustainable stormwater management. So let me briefly introduce Jurijs. Jurijs has a Bachelor of Science in Economics and Business and Master of Science in International Environmental Science from Lund University. He has more than 15 years of experience working with sustainable urban planning projects, specializing in green infrastructure, sustainable mobility, finance, and economic matters. Currently, he is a team leader and developing a guidance document on sustainable urban drain system implementation for municipalities and designers, landscape architects. He has acted as an expert on sustainable stormwater management in various urban planning and design projects in Latvia, Kazakhstan, and Russia. So, Jurijs, please, the floor is yours.
Hey, tere, labdien, labadiena, cześć. I hope I have covered all the participant countries here. So I think we have met with some people here, and indeed it was Ken. With him we started our joint journey on this green and blue path back in 2011 by initiating this Latvian Estonian project called Drain for Life, where we really started pushing for these things in Latvia. So it's not really 15 years with green infrastructure and SUDS, it's around 10 years now, but it's been quite a journey already. And I really hope I will fit within half an hour to tell. So basically, a bit of an introduction of what we how we view the green infrastructure and sustainable urban drainage. So I guess if I have to say the two key words, those are: one, multifunctional infrastructure, and two, stormwater not as a problem but as an opportunity, or not as we say in Latvian, not nevis defects but effects. Yeah, so how to turn this problem into a solution, or a problem into a resource, right? So what we really practice, and where we see the most potential actually in Latvia, is the combination with the green infrastructure, because a lot of our systems, storm sewer systems or combined sewer systems, are outdated and with limited capacity. And green infrastructure comes in very handy, of course, where we have space. Where we don't have space, probably we have a hard time implementing green infrastructure, except for green roofs or infiltration solutions where groundwater level allows us to do so. Also for Latvia, it's let's say it's both challenge and opportunity. We are the only country around the Baltic Sea region where, as a rule, there are no tariff or fees for stormwater management. Only in combined sewer systems we have to pay this fee. So on one hand, it is a problem because the municipalities don't have much money for investing into stormwater management. On the other hand, it gives an opportunity because we have to deal with the systems that we have at hand, right? So we have to improvise with a lot of decentralized solutions. And let's say this also it's a good context to look at, or a good theoretical framework, so to say. The traditional storm sewer design is this number one. So let's say we design the sewer for 1 year, or for the rain event with a return period of 1 year or 2 year. But we also have to look on the extreme events, what will happen with our site or with our area of the city in case it rains not 20 millimeter of rain, but 150 millimeters of rain, which would be, let's say, for Riga, once in 200-year event. So we have to be ready for that, and we have to prepare our SUDS and our terrain and our vertical planning and our levels for this, as well as we need to know what will happen day to day, where 70 to 80% of the total rainfall falls. So will we have enough water for our stormwater solutions? Will our stormwater solutions be effective in treatment of this water? So basically, we are trying to look at all those aspects when we think or design the green and blue infrastructure techniques or SUDS. So I'm gonna mention the 6 groups of project. The projects I'm gonna talk about are not exhaustive. We have not many more, but quite more. But we can be speaking about each of them for half a day. So I'll be speaking very briefly about. So of course we have this traditional sort of grid infrastructure that all people around especially in Estonia and Lithuania are familiar with, and certainly Finland and Sweden and Poland as well. So these are green infrastructure that, let's say, that is traditional from the conventional times. Ponds and ditches and green parking lots, and also we have this is it can be called a stormwater park. So the park that is built around a blue and green corridor in Kondra city. Now a very so-called dry river project in Rujena, just across the border from Estonia, one of the northern cities or towns in Latvia, where many Estonians come to shop for alcohol too. So if you come, please visit the site. So you'll have two reasons to visit this city, right? And yes, a good thing about this is that is also one thing I haven't mentioned when I talked about this multifunctionality is actually why is actually the landscape aspect and the public space aspect. It's that we can really benefit from, and this is a good example how it's done in a public space setting. The same Rujena town where not so visible but effective infiltration solutions, French drains have been implemented. And okay, this is not okay. This is more. It's not so much for infiltration, but it's more for filtration and let's say runoff management, but still so-called dry rivers in Ogre town, as well as rain gardens. And a very interesting project, I think it's one of the flagship projects we now have to show, we can show in Riga, is a rain garden, or it's called a biofiltration, bioswale in a major shopping center parking lot. So it's a big parking lot, and it was implemented already quite some time ago. So this, I think, was the first wet season when it operated. And you see, like typically engineers plan for 1 year return period rain. So some four years back, actually it's exactly 4 years back, we had you see this between 1 and 10 year rainfall, depending on the duration you measure. And you see the rain garden is quite far from being full, so it probably will do well even in a 100-year rain event. Also, rain gardens and infiltration areas and permeable areas in a school in SAK. I think these are okay. There are quite some projects that have implemented rain gardens or swales in residential areas as well, like condominium or block houses. Unfortunately, I don't have pictures yet, but we have done this also. So this is a very nice project. I'm not sure it will be implemented, but the design is really impressive. It's in the center of Riga. It's in the center of Riga, and they had this discharge a limitation of 15 liters per second from the area that is, I think, something like 2 hectares. And for those who do some calculations here, let's say the standard discharge could be as much as, let's say, 200 liters per second for this area. So obviously engineers and landscape architects needed to do something, and they came up with a cascade of green techniques consisting of bioswales, rain gardens, soil separator in the end, because we couldn't do without them in Riga, but it's changing. Pond basin and yes, and then pressurized discharge into a combined sewer. So you see some visualizations here, and you see quite some capacity for storage and discharge. So basically, well, the reason it's not being built is just that the site has changed the owner. So it's not because the concept hasn't worked. It's just because of the ownership issue. So maybe it will be implemented. We don't know. Okay, there are some conceptual designs for public spaces as well. I'm not sure if this one is going to be implemented, but it's just to show sort of the direction of our thinking. By our, I mean our collective Latvian community of engineers and landscape architects. And one of the big projects, the biggest project, and keeping fingers crossed it will work out. And actually, this is the project we started out together with Ken 10 years ago. It started as a feasibility study within this Latvian Estonian cooperation project, and now it's been built. So this is the area not far from the historical center of the city, the former cargo railway yard. It's been developed quite how to say, rapidly, and the problem there is that it's a low-lying area, and the storm water has to be pumped with 2 pumping stations. So in order to do this, the drainage in a conventional way, the city would have had to rebuild 2 pumping stations, pressurized sewers, as well as build very expensive sewers here, because the building ground conditions are not very favorable. So instead, there was an idea to come up with natural drainage, or naturally resembling drainage, and basically, yeah, okay. I hope this feasibility study, Estonian Latvian feasibility study slide was here, but it was taken out for time constraints. So basically, the feasibility study prepared 3 options, 1 more conventional and 2 more green, and then this one option was chosen with canals and pond for stormwater management, and basically it's been implemented. Okay. Then after the feasibility study, there was a local plan for the site developed by the city, and within this local plan, this concept was sort of cemented. And then there was a let's say the landscape concept prepared for the whole area of the city, and this green and blue corridor concept was further developed and sort of blended with other landscape elements of the whole area. So, and now then it was designed, and here is the sort of the design, the technical design solution of this corridor. So it's a cascade of swale and gabion canal and sort of park with sort of semi-wet, semi-dry river or a creek, and then a park with a pond. And you see some visualizations here. It looks nice, and I mean the pictures are like what it could be like in 20 years, because you see the trees are quite tall, and the trees are now being planted. And a good thing about that is that the use of dynamic hydrological modeling allowed us to understand variation of levels and to bring these different variation of levels into the design concept. So you see the sort of the levels, the permanent level of the system, which is like around 1 meter above sea level, and where when a big storm, huge storm comes, well, it's not a huge, it's big rain, 50 millimeters of rain comes, you see this landscaped areas that are lower than others are flooded, and but the network of footpaths make it interesting still to observe and walk around and experience this sort of flooded water. And then also in case of extreme rain, if we get some sort of extreme weather warning, there is a possibility to drain the system up to the level of -1. So negative water level below sea level, and then it can prepare to take up the huge storm up to 150 millimeters rain. So here are some technical drawings, not so interesting, but it will be here in the presentation, and you can look this up if interested. Yeah, so as I told, like we wouldn't be able to develop the system, to model it without hydrologic and hydraulic modeling. Of course, it yet to be seen how correct the modeling was, because it's now being built, but we will see soon. Yes, so it's maybe not so interesting for landscape architects among you, but is just sort of a check how we saw the total runoff in different phases of the development of the area, and different scenarios of rain, and also we checked against the capacity of the system. So basically, what it says is that for a huge rain, for 200 years rain now, the system will be sufficient, even fully developed. However, if like a huge rain, like 1 in 500 years comes, or 200-year rain in future climate scenario comes, then the capacity of the system will not be enough. So this means that we will need to plan for some discharge limitations. So this shows that probably when the system is built and when the area develops, at some point we may have to impose, or the city may have to impose the discharge limitations. Would be good anyway to keep the natural water balance. So yeah, so the visualizations look much better, but the good news is that it's been built, and there was some, yeah. So you see the pond part, and to be completed in 2022, and hopefully, so it will take some years for grass to grow, for trees to grow, for plants to be established. So I guess in when this whole COVID nightmare ends, you're welcome to visit it. It will be, hopefully it will be well, hopefully it will be completely finished. I mean the pandemic by the time when it's really enjoyable. Okay, so that was for let's say for implemented and for design projects, and now for some lot of let's say more general projects. May I ask how much more time I have?
You have 10 minutes more.
All right, great. It's very unusual for me to have 10 minutes more at this point. So, all right. Some projects that we did again. I mean, collective we in Latvia did. There was quite a good project, Riga against flood. So it did some flood modeling for storms, for rainfall, as well as for sea and river waters, of course. And I guess these are sort of the main outcomes that are of concern for us, of interest. And let's say the biggest takeaway that we have from that project are meteorological data, intensity, duration, frequency tables. So basically, these tables allow us to calculate the volume of runoff for different rain events. Here is the flooding map for different rain magnitude. Yep, there have been some other sort of drainage basin or subcatchment planning projects that are of interest, where we attempted to prepare catchment management plans. So to view the hydrological, to view the watershed in an integrated manner, and to develop centralized and decentralized solutions for stormwater management. And one has been done in Riga, and one has been done in Jelgava city. Nice features about this project is that we attempted to do some economic analysis of economic and financial analysis of flooding and of implementing green infrastructure. And I think the takeaway message from the analysis was that the flooding damage, let's say, that if you invest only in flood risk management with simply, let's say, engineering, hydro engineering, gray infrastructure or traditional facilities, you may save some flooding damage. But if you do this in a way that is nice, that is attractive, then you have a much greater benefit. This is something Ken has mentioned. It's that we have benefit of improved public space that in turn increases the property value. So this is a good thing to think about. Also, we have just like Finns in Helsinki and Estonians in Tartu implemented and adapted this green area factor tool. Also that comprises, or that includes sustainable stormwater management features. So basically now it's been implemented in Riga building regulations, meaning that for example, we have this is it here? Yeah, well, anyway, we have this mandatory requirement for green space, which is called free green area in cities. And what this tool does actually, it says that you may have, what it says is that, let's say 10 square meters or 100 square meters of tree cover is much more valuable than 100 square meters of simply lawn. And this tool compares different elements of green infrastructure given weights and factors, and calculates this green factor in the end. So basically you can have different options of different combinations of green infrastructure for the same site, and check sort of the total value. And now we are the Riga is implementing some elements of it into building regulations. So, for example, you can compensate some a lawn by a tree. So basically, you can have less area but more dense green infrastructure, which is really good for development flexibility, keeping the provision of ecosystem services of the green infrastructure solutions. And we have adapted this tool for Riga. Something we did some 3 years ago is the study of local legislation. So we did a very thorough analysis of local legislation, let's say finding out what laws stand in the way of implementing green infrastructure for stormwater management, and we wrote down some solutions. To our unfortunately, it's on the shelf yet. It's not been implemented in all respects. Some of the things have been changed, but some are changing at the moment. But still, there are a lot of things to do. Basically, let's say our present legislation does not impede. It lets us build the green infrastructure, but it does not foster, does not stimulate, it does not help the green infrastructure. So we have a lot of work there. Yes, and here are some proposals and specific ways to include in the legislation that we proposed. All right, and the last project I want to mention, and actually I was late for the seminar because I was in the other seminar that spoke about this project. We are now preparing guidelines for municipalities and for designers and landscape architects for green infrastructure or for SUDS, and it's in the final stage now. So we will publish the document, the end versions of the documents by the end of October, but in October. And what it consists, basically we have published 3 documents. One is the academic study or scientific research literature review about the pollutants in stormwater from different land uses. And also we have studied the the potential of different green infrastructure SUDS techniques for treatment of stormwater. So basically, it started out with this skepticism of municipalities and developers saying, does this work? Okay, it looks nice, but does it clean the water? Does it treat the water? And basically, the conclusion is that yes, it does. It works as good as well as great infrastructure, and maybe better in many respects, right? So this was the first part, like a theoretical framework for the next stages. And in the next stages, we also summarized the Dutch, German, Swedish, Norwegian approach to stormwater treatment, because we have this sort of traditional Soviet style of setting limit values for pollutants, and it really doesn't work with stormwater, with the green infrastructure, because the water quality parameters vary across the rainfall, across the seasons, across the places in the catchment. So a more modern approach is to regulate or to suggest specific treatment or ways of treatment or options of treatment for specific land uses. So we have summarized international experience and also formulated a proposal for Latvian municipalities that consists of, let's say, we have identified 4 sort of stormwater classes: unpolluted, slightly polluted, more or less polluted. It's not a correct translation, of course, and polluted, right? And then we have classified different land uses in different areas based on these 4 classes. And for each of the 4 classes, we have proposed the stages of treatment, and then we have proposed what green techniques could be used at the different stages of treatment. So this is like a blueprint for municipalities to use it, as it's like a template to take it and then implement in their binding regulations of the municipality. So we hope this works. It's let's say history in the making. We'll see how it works. We are now trying to implement. And yes, Gintaras, I see your face. It's the one more minute. I'm
your
sorry.
Minutes have been burnt. Yeah, 1 minute, please.
And the last one is the design guidelines for engineers and landscape architects, where we really go into quite a bit of detail about both hydrological and hydraulic calculations for green techniques, and specific technical information about these green techniques based on our experience. So the let's say cross sections that you see or are those taken from the real projects that we implemented in Latvia. So this is something that is really interesting, and also something that we did. This is an example for a residential area. We provided some, let's say, typical layouts, typical solutions for a residential area, industrial area, parking lots, local streets. So this now can be taken further by municipalities and designers. So yes, here are many my emails because I associated with many organizations working in this field in Latvia. So feel free to contact me via any of these.
Thank you, Juris. Thank you for your nice presentation. And we have currently in the chat, you can also see a couple of burning questions.
Yep.
The first one is by Vilja. Interesting how early warning can inform the maintenance.
Yes, it was more like a comment. I think it's a very clever direction that if we can have these early warnings or see where the change is, that we can also design parks that react to that.
Yes. I mean, this is sort of I think this is something really, if we're talking about this smart city, but initiatives, it's how we can make multifunctional spaces and save some money as well. It's the same as with real-time control. I haven't spoken about this because we haven't had any experience with that. But for example, if you have a local streets with like Gen has shown, or I have shown in Copenhagen, you can have if you have this early warning, you can have a local valves closing down and using these streets to fill up and decrease the load on the sewer system. So yes, there is a lot of things to think about.
Okay, thank you. And our next speaker, Przemysław Kowalski, is very curious to find out what is the source of.
That's the seminars that I wanted to listen to. So,
do you please silence your mic? Let me see, who is that stormy sounding? Yeah. Okay. Przemysław Kowalski is asking, what is the source of data to monitorize the benefits of green infrastructure against the gray infrastructure?
All right. So the financial benefits is quite simple. There's a construction cost and maintenance costs. The economic benefits, we don't have any local studies, so we rely on international studies that say, well, okay, we do have local studies for flooding damage, right? So this is quite we have local data for flooding damage. If we talk about the real estate price increase, we rely on international studies. So of course it's a bit of speculation, but I think it's quite a reasonable speculation to say that if there is a quality public space, it's good for real estate prices. But thank you for your question. If there are some Latvians who would be interested in studying this, that would be very interesting to study the relationship between green space and functional green and blue infrastructure provision and real estate value.
Thank you, Juris, for your answers and for your presentation. Thank you. So now I have pleasure to present our presenter from Poland, Przemysław Kowalski, who will talk today about urban floods, mistakes made in history and potential solutions. So who is Przemysław Kowalski? Przemysław is a gardener and active landscape architect, researcher and academic teacher at Krakow University of Technology, Faculty of Architecture. Przemysław is a professional interested include urban green infrastructure development. Recently, he turns towards the use of indigenous plants and species in landscape design, with several projects already under construction. So, Przemysław, the floor is yours, and we are here to listen for your presentation.
Hello, everybody. For unknown reasons, my camera is not broadcasting any image, but I keep it running. Maybe it starts in some moment to show like my personal view. Okay, I'd like to share some thoughts on the historical background of the situation we have currently in most of world cities, both small towns, even villages, and metropolises in global scale. We have seen this year many informations on media from China, North America, about the floods that are occurring here and there. Nearly every day, every week, we have some informations on that. Also in Central Europe this year, we have experienced very intense rainfalls with harsh consequences with the floods. You know the situation from northwestern Germany, Belgium, and France. We also experienced in southern Poland, especially in the city of Krakow. 2 times this year, we already had the rainfall that is named as 500 years. So probably we are 1,000 years ahead now. So to start from like some philosophical sentence, you can read it. This is the sentence expressed already 25 years ago, but Professor Wacław Ostrowski, who published his book on urban planning in the context of nature development. Unfortunately, this book is only Polish, so if you want to read it, unfortunately, you have to learn our complicated or difficult language. But the fact is that we are the animal species that in fact fulfills all the elements of definition of invasive species. So we are changing very drastically and brutally the global environment in a way that can be irreversible, which is a threat for both ourselves and for other animal and plant species living on Earth. What we are facing now are major problems with like consequences of very intense development of urban settlements, which accumulate over 50% of human populations living on Earth these days. Though we are like making some sensations of the local floods in the cities, the situation is not new. The first mentions about impacts of human activities on the landscape of nature we can find as far back in the history as in 4th and 5th century BC in the Plato's dialogue of Critias, who is discussing the consequences of forest removal on the presence, existence of streams, creeks, and water springs, water sources, concluding that before us, he's saying, so before this 5th century BC, there have been forests with life, with streams, with lakes, with creeks, but these days nothing like that is happening. The water is like flushing out, useless, out of the hills, out of the mountains, because there is no like element of landscape of nature who could retain this water. So we knew from over 2,500 years that, or what we should do with to keep the water in like borders to properly manage it. But we didn't learn this lesson, and we have the situation as we have today. Needless to say that after the Plateau, people were just accommodating to the situation, like human communities were accommodating to the situation of neighboring rivers. Some communities, some populations have been adapting to live on the riverbanks, relying on the rivers as a resource of life, food, of transportation. Needless to say that Chinese civilizations treated rivers as a main transportation or communication roads. But other communities preferred to climb up on the mountains and to localize their settlements higher above the potential dangers coming from the waters. This led to development of different types of cities, but if you look on European situations, most of like administrative centers in European cities are located on the elevated parts of the city. Also in the city of Kraków, where I'm originating from, the royal castle, the administrative center of both city of Kraków and Poland, since the Kraków was the capital of Poland, is located on the hill, located on the or positioned on the riverbank of Wisła River. It's like elevated of 30 meters above like average level of Wisła River. So the communities, local communities, have adapted to the situation. That lasted for centuries, for thousands of years. Some parts of populations have been using like the potential of river for fishing, for like a river industry, like breweries, bleaches, etc., who were like run by living water. Most of European cities have been located on the areas where water bodies have been present or spread all around the landscape more or less evenly. Of course, there was one dominating water body, like a big river. In Kraków, this is the Wisła River, but there have been dozens of smaller streams and creeks flowing within and around the cities. This has been used both as a resource for running the city economy, for hygiene, for industrial purposes, but also waters have been utilized as like a defense element against enemies who might want to invade the cities. Of course, during the development of the cities, the situation has been changing a little bit, step by step. We were draining swamps, we were removing smaller creeks, smaller streams, or we were hiding them. But the process was relatively steady till the end of 18th century. Many cities in Europe, also the city of Kraków, have been experiencing very intense flood events since the early days of functioning of the cities. Here on this slide, you can see listed major flood events that hit the city of Kraków since 16th century. Of course, I don't have precise information from the city diaries, from the chronicles, whether they are all the major events or not, but we can count over a dozen of those intense floods that have brought damages, life losses to the city of Kraków. But we were coping with this relatively successfully. We were using those flood events as an extra resource to fertilize our gardens, our fields of crops. Of course, we were suffering a lot sometimes, but normally we treated it as something normal, something regular. Situation started to change a little bit after initiation of industrialization era. So it was like end of 18th century and 19th century, where when the urban economy had to spread out of the central core of the cities, the damages brought by floods have been more and more expensive, more and more intense. So authorities of many cities have decided to like enforce the riverbanks to avoid further damages, further destructions to those to the urban populations and to urban industries. Most of European cities have been like secured against the floodwaters by the end of 19th century and in early years of the 20th century. Here you can see the two examples of Austro-Hungarian monarchy that existed till the Second World War, the cities of Vienna and Kraków, who completed their embankments in the same year, 1913. Here on this slide, you can see how the situation of city of Kraków looked like in the mid of 19th century. You can see the river of Wisła, the Vistula River, which was this major like a reason for source of floods. But you can see also countless smaller creeks, streams, rivers, and lots of swampy areas that have been spread all around the city. The city of Kraków was established in about 10th year of our era, was located here because of some very attractive topographic reasons. There have been several hills in this core center of Kraków, surrounded by swampy areas, supported by a number of streams and rivers who were discharging to those swampy areas and through them to Wisła River. But when we look on the situation, how it is these days, this is the original map of the city of Kraków from this mid of 19th century. You can see what we have done. And the situation looks exactly the same in many European and global cities. Everything that has been wet, has been natural, has been turned into living areas. We are lucky enough to retain many areas that have been natural, the swamps. So we have some potential to preserve the city against the major floods, but there are lots of other problems, especially in the eastern part of these days, Kraków. You can see from the aerial photograph that the city of Kraków is like ranging here to this line, even to the areas that have not been covered by the original map from the mid of 19th century. After completing the embankments, many European cities had decided that, well, okay, we are now safe against the floods. We can do a little bit more in terms of development. We are not so much prone to another flood events. On this slide, you can see on the like an image based on the study of Severin Hohensinner. This is the Austrian scientist who is making a very good comprehensive studies of changing of river landscape in Austria, especially in the neighborhood of Vienna. The main river flowing through Vienna is, of course, the Danube. And here you can see what we have experienced in many European cities, in most of European cities, how the riverine landscape has been transformed since 15th, 16th, 17th century till our times. And we can observe exactly the same process in most of European cities, which is very, very bad for like a background, which creates a very bad background for like a protection against flood events. After enforcing or embanking the major rivers, as I said, we started to get closer riverbanks. We have also started to like block or cover the smaller creeks, treating them as not interesting, not important element of urban infrastructure, not understanding their role, their importance in urban landscape, in the well-being, in the health of the city. And as you could see on the satellite image, in fact, besides the major river of Vistula, we have only 3-4 more rivers, mid-sized rivers flowing through the city that have not been covered. All the others that have been present through centuries in the city are now being fully covered in the very narrow tubes and the very narrow sewage system, which these days brings very serious consequences to like a living standard on the banks of those former edges. Why I'm saying or putting so much stress on those smaller creeks? Because what we can observe these days is that the threat from or flood threat from the running water is coming from other sources, not from the major rivers that have been like properly enforced and banked. And really we have, of course, excluding the situations of like damaging or destruction of embankments, we are roughly more or less protected against major flood events from big rivers. What you can see on this map is the plan of the city of Dresden in eastern Germany, and with indication of areas that have been inundated not by the river Elbe, which is indicated here by this bright blue color, but by other creeks, by other water bodies from other streams that have inundated especially the center of the city of Dresden, including the Twinger with its famous gardens. So this is the threat we are facing these days, not only in Dresden situation, but also in the city of Krakow. While we've had, as I mentioned previously, also already 2 times this year, this 500 rainfall. Many parts of the city, many locations in the city have been inundated not by the river of Wisła, who didn't reach even the alarm level, but by the smaller creeks flowing here that used to flow through the city in different areas. Sometimes it's really the water from those creeks, sometimes it's the groundwater which level is rising drastically. So these are like a major reasons for our concern in the urban development, or these are major like elements that we should concentrate on to think how to protect our cities from damages. Of course, the other aspect is increasing level or proportion of those impermeable surfaces. The fact is that we have entered not only on the flood plains of many streams and rivers, but we also have exceeded the minimal level of those, what we call in Polish, biologically active surfaces that should be kept on the level at least 50%, as some research shows. I had this unpleasant chance to experience localized flash flood in 2018, so it was like 3 years ago, in a smaller town or even a village of Saalbach-Hinterglemm, which is located in Austria, south from the city of Salzburg. The rainfall that brought such damages, as you can see here, lasted only 4 hours, bringing like 90 millimeters of rain. So it was really heavy accumulation of rainfall. 90% of damages have been caused not by the main river flowing through the valley, but by small creeks flowing from the mountain hills down to the valley. The major reason for like economical losses in this case was that there have been very intense development of infrastructure right on the edges of the valleys of those creeks that normally in the sunny days are completely dry. But during this heavy rain event, they turned into crazy brown big rivers, as you can see on this first image. Luckily, there were no life losses. 2 or 3 persons have been like injured, but except of economical losses, nothing more serious has happened. So how can we cope with those threats coming from different sides in case of in terms of urban flash floods? We should work on 3 like layers or levels. As previous speakers have already mentioned, some solutions can be easily or are easily implemented in the cities. But let me explain a little bit closer those 3 levels of attitude or coping with urban floods. First and most important level is the planning. As a major planning strategy, I take into consideration the green infrastructure philosophy, but not considered as like a very narrow, localized solutions for dealing with water or urban heat island, etc., but as a planning strategy that is implemented before development already occurs. Treating green infrastructure philosophy or strategy as in a very broad intellectual concept, we should name as a green infrastructure solutions only those who have been implemented before development started, and as a complementary resources for green infrastructure, those blue and green nature-based solutions that are implemented within our cities. So those of you who remember one of my previous lectures during like a year ago meeting, or who had a chance to read Benedict and McMahon like a dictionary booklet on the green infrastructure, should remember that there is a decalogue of the rules, principles that are behind the philosophy of green infrastructure. So we should start thinking on the consequences of our planning decisions before development already occurs. Unfortunately, in practice, it's way easier to say than done. But in contemporary world, when we try to monetize everything, we should engage public spends, public funds into planning more intensely. Of course, there always is an explanation that there is not enough budget to do this or that. But as we see from the current COVID situations, nearly every country all around the world could find enough billions of euros or dollars to invest into keeping economy running despite this crash caused by COVID situations. So I think that spends on acquisition of those most sensitive lands should be also included in the planning strategies of all the cities, because it's clear that when we discuss with private owners and investors who are pushing to develop all the plots all around the city, of course, we are on the lost position. But when we engage public will and funds into development, into planning strategies, we may achieve way better results in coping with those climate changes, including flash floods that we are experiencing in the cities. Second level is the adaptation strategies that are including, for instance, the blue-green solutions that we had a chance to listen about on two previous presentations. We should take into consideration the preservation of the wetlands that are present, still present in the cities. We should consider to integrate the floodplains, flood zones into urban green areas, recreational areas, with not expensive infrastructure that could be eventually damaged during the major flood events, with no major economic consequences to the public. And of course, by keeping sensitive infrastructure like factories, like shopping centers, like living or housing estates away from floodplains, from flood zones. Of course, one of the adaptation strategies that is gaining increasing popularity all around the world is the concept of building floating houses. we could see in recent decade many examples of such individual and like group projects that can support, can help local communities to stay on these risky areas while like being protected or safe from potential flood events. Of course, it's not cheap, it's rather expensive, it's dedicated, or only countries who are wealthier can afford to organize some such projects. Nature-based solutions, we could also hear a lot about those proposals, those solutions in previous lectures, starting from green roofs, to reduce the potential runoff from the roofs of the buildings of the houses. Those nature-based solutions we may implement also on existing houses through construction of rain gardens, including the bioswales, including retention ponds, through the restoration of the wetlands, those who have been drained, who have been dried out in recent years.
Es braucu otrdien, laikam jau pēc manis neviens nebrauca. Es aiziešu.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And other also blue-green projects that are, in my opinion, should be defined as like a nature-based solution, not necessarily the green infrastructure, treating the concept of green infrastructure like as a wider philosophy, but not punctual interventions. To conclude, as I said previously, we as a civilization are not learning. We don't take lessons from the history, and we are still doing many, well, irresponsible things, trying to rely on technique and technology, which is a mistake, what we can observe today, being endangered by increasing forces of nature. The most optimal way of dealing with water in urbanized areas is the planning level. We should avoid mistakes that we have done in recent centuries, so to retain, to keep water bodies in their natural state, removing or moving away out of their range new investments. What we can observe in Poland, in the city of Kraków, nothing like that is happening. So still the lesson is not learned. The second layer is to implement the adaptive strategies. Of course, they can be implemented to existing areas that are already developed, which is very costly and not necessarily successful. Of course, through adaptation strategies, we can mitigate in smaller or major extent the threats coming from flash floods, but we will not completely exclude them from like public life as a regular threat, as a regular danger, because we again cannot technically like face the with our techniques we cannot face the forces of nature. And nature-based solutions as a part of those adaptive strategies should also be implemented to improve the quality of existing spaces, of existing areas. Of course, there are many questions what to do with the cities that are densely populated, densely developed. We cannot imagine that we could demolish some districts of the city to spread the people around and to make like the living standard better through greening on the expense of demolished districts. This is out of discussion, of course, but we should put as much effort to like a public discourse to really implement as much those nature-based solutions into the city, into the cities as possible. Again, there are some aspects of cultural heritage. We cannot imagine that like beautiful plazas in Italy will be fully greened because we need more greenery. There we have to find some balance. To sum up, when we develop the new cities, the new urban districts, we should start on the planning, which is most cost effective, which is the cheapest solution, though one of the most difficult when we engage the public discourse. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Przemysław, for your nice presentation. You very well rounded up all the discussion themes and made a sort of a conclusion from all our presentations. So we still have some time for our panel discussion. Please all speakers be connected and show your faces to the audience. And we are welcoming the questions from the audience.
Gintaras, there's a good question on the chat. How are green infrastructure techniques different from nature-based solutions?
Yes, yes, right. Przemysław, so this goes to you still.
Yeah, well, okay. I would like to scientifically distinguish the green infrastructure as a master planning concept from using nature-based solutions within the cities. Green infrastructure is, as I mentioned, a planning concept. So it's a system of interconnected, most welcome natural spaces, natural or semi-natural areas that are protected from further development. What we realize, what we build in the cities in a way, in a form of biospheres, of rain gardens, etc., are nature-based solutions that can be, but not necessarily are, interconnected with the broader green infrastructure that from definition or by definition should be connected to the open landscape surrounding the city. So if we, for instance, arrange a rain garden on the market square of a city, it's only a nature-based solution helping us to deal with some issues of climate change. But when it's not connected to other green elements guiding us out of the city, it's only a nature-based solution. When this rain garden would be connected, was connected through some links to an external landscape, then it becomes a part of green infrastructure. So this, in my opinion, is the difference between nature-based solutions and green infrastructure.
Thank you, Przemysław, for this very good explanation. And I see Juris has a good comment in chat. Juris, can you?
No, it's just yeah.
It was a question, yeah.
I hope I understood correctly Przemysław's concept or idea that
precisely
it has to be connected. It has to be connected. Okay.
Yeah, but I see your question. Does it also go to Przemysław? Has it, or it goes to all participants? Has any country included flood resilience into their investment or recovery funding?
Yeah. When Przemysław mentioned COVID, resilience and recovery, right? So. Because from what I know, we in Latvia, we have included a lot of sustainable mobility projects and some some industrial area development, but I'm not sure we have included any flood resilience. So how about other countries?
Yeah, we could take it as
from
good
Polish
advice.
perspective. I also think the situation is exactly the same. So mostly investment, improvement of infrastructure or social functioning, but the climate change management issues have play minor role in it. Maybe renewable energy, if so.
Yes.
Yeah,
energy efficiency.
I read a report by UN Environment Committee that spread of pandemias and viruses is very much connected to environment degradation also. But that's, of course, a related topic. So we are open now to questions. And I have a question to Vilja, who spoke the first. Vilja, you spoke about climate adaptation. And I'm just wondering, on which scale are we talking when we talk about climate adaptation? Are we talking about global climate? We talk about dominating climate, let's say what is typical to Baltic Sea region and some particular cities, or we talk about microclimate on a local scale? What do you think?
I think it depends on the scope of the work, of course, or the project, but usually I am working with I think like city scale is very important, but well, also we face this that we were doing this evaluation actually for Tampere, where Anna also is working, for a master plan for the central areas, and there was a wish to be more accurate about the climate change scenarios so that we could base our evaluations or our estimations on a more detailed temporal scale and a geographical scale. But that is also, of course, very difficult because the climate models are global models and maybe for smaller regions, but it's not very easy to become accurate. It's really something very unpredictable on more and more local scale you go. So when I talk about climate adaptation, I mean, it depends on the scale of the work, of course. So you usually, as landscape architects, we work in an urban scale of a city or maybe a district, but it could be also microclimate, like modeling the microclimate of a new neighborhood or of a block, residential block as well. But
yeah, good point, because I see that it's very frequent, the situation when we have to explain to our politicians what will be the benefits. We know those European directives and the policy guidance documents, but municipalities that have to invest money, they are also interested in very practical issues. What will be the benefits and who will benefit from that?
Yes, there are some, like in the national strategy, for example, in Finland for climate adaptation by the government, actually the most measures for climate adaptation are not like green infrastructure or nature-based solutions related, but they rather on a very general level, different kinds of methods. And up to date, there is much more focus on controlling climate change or mitigating and slowing down climate change than adaptation. And I think in this field of adaptation, actually landscape architecture is very central profession. And what I was coming to is the point that because it is hard to prove the advantages of climate adaptation if you cannot monitorize the advantages, but of course then you need studies about risk and also the cost of damage. And there is also this guideline in the national program for climate adaptation that municipalities, for example, should first focus on measures that have other advantages or importance at the same time, so that such projects that would be implemented anyway, but they also contribute to climate adaptation. And I think this is also something that when we design, for example, green areas and blue-green infrastructure sort of or nature-based solutions integrated in those areas, then it's something that has also other value because it has recreational value, biological value, etc. So that's my view on the question. I hope I replied.
We lost Gintaras, but maybe I will ask question now. How it's in our countries, in Baltic Sea region countries, do we have some tax benefits for any investment in rainwater management? Yes, Yuri, I think this economic viewpoint that you could bring in would be very beneficial. So for us and municipalities and landscape architects in municipalities, for us it might be easier to promote these designs.
Well, I know for example, it's indirectly, there are many cities and countries that have sort of connection fees for stormwater management. So if you connect, and I think it's all countries except for Latvia have stormwater fees, meaning that if you retain stormwater on site, then you don't pay for this. And some cities like Copenhagen, they have incentive mechanisms like co-financing of disconnection solutions. Actually, we have done some we have done some policy analysis about this aspect, some aspects of it for the Baltic Sea region that I can post a link to. But it's my understanding, Indra, that all cities but Latvia have this incentive in some or another way. So this is, maybe video or somebody else can comment. I have also heard complaints from Finnish colleagues that the motivation to disconnect is not enough. So in theory, there are stormwater tariffs or stormwater fees, but they are not motivating enough. So it would be interesting to hear practitioners' perspective on this.
Yes, so Vilja, how it's in Finland? Do you know something more?
I think municipalities have these stormwater programs, but I'm not so well aware of financial support or also these regulations for implementing the solutions. I think it's very much more up to the different professionals to promote their best knowledge.
I know that also, as I'm quite involved in New European Bauhaus initiative of European Commission and in EFLA Europe, so they are now launching these financial tools or how these will be financed. So this part of creative industry to what landscape architects bring, like these design solutions, might be implemented to this engineering part. So I hope we can try at least all this design typology to promote maybe through these financial tools, not by physically implementing, but by having this typology, or let's follow these links. They are just opening now this report on future finances. And also I shared that I'm quite impressed by today's presentation. I'm really surprised how much we have done in this region, and so we are quite in a good level comparing to other countries. I shared the link where is in the EFLA Europe. We have, besides Baltic Sea region group, I know there is Nordic group, Visegrad group, and also Mediterranean group. So Mediterranean group made some small brochure as landscape architects for these design solutions, and it was presented to European Commission Directorate General and several ones in several meetings. So they were really appreciated by their schematic and easy format of communicating these issues. So also in this chat, you can see that today there was presented also communication vice president of EFLA Europe in our seminar, and she proposes if we will somehow come up with our format of brochure, maybe EFLA Europe is ready to support us. So it's also a possibility to come together and express our voice from this region, from our perspectives, and to more broadly. And also, maybe this might be one of further steps. Let's brainstorm about that later. And yes, GINTARAS is also back.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was a little bit disconnected by the unstable connection. We have almost a rainstorm in Vilnius now.
Wow.
Yeah. I think, Indra, you mentioned very good ideas. What I heard today really impressed me as well. I see people are working in different directions very thoroughly, very fundamentally. At least we need to keep contact, and it seems like we probably can establish a sort of a working group for stormwater management, and we could assess this opportunity from different aspects, including research aspect, including teaching maybe, and a sort of a study trip maybe when the situation allows. And very good idea by Indra, we could also apply for funding. We just should look which is the proper source.
Just to communicate. And I also really proud about how in this topic, landscape architects is strongly on an equal partnership working with other experts. Like JURIJS is not a landscape architect, but I know that from Latvian part, they are really working really closely with landscape architects. And I wasn't in this topic previously. I'm really surprised about the amount, and it's really good that you shared realized projects and also unrealized ones. So we could have at least the knowledge base, what's in the field.
Yeah, we are now also open for questions from the audience, but meanwhile, people are thinking or writing us questions. May we think about some small outcome of our today's discussion, for example, collecting 3 cases from every country, which we think might be like outstanding, or disclosing some specific aspect, and then putting them to one leaflet or one newsletter and just releasing it on our websites. And maybe those who are willing can print it out in paper. What do you think?
As usual, it's a brilliant idea, but who will manage it?
Yeah, we can do it until the end of the year, and for Christmas we can have a nice leaflet.
Okay.
We hear good voices pro that idea. Yeah. Very
good.
So sure. let's make a note for that. And do we have still questions from audience, or maybe somebody wants to tell us something and to tell about your interesting experience or any problems that you encountered in this field? Please be open. You can just unmute and connect your camera, and please say it to everybody. We have professionals, and I see we have also quite many, at least Lithuanian attendees. Many of them are working in municipalities, doing a responsible work in planning and managing landscapes maybe. And what is your opinion? I would be very eager to find this out.
And you can also ask this question in your national language. So we are ready to translate.
Yeah, we can translate.
And or write in any of languages, we can manage to translate this. Yeah. So let's make it easy for more in working mood, not as official mood.
We have 5 interpreters here. I think we have a weekend ahead, so people probably are already thinking about that. And we have already 5 o'clock. I think it was really very informative and very well prepared presentations. They were quite different and disclosing different aspects and different benefits of sustainable urban drain, or whatever we call it. We all know what are we talking about. Probably in communicating further, we could realize our small promise that we just made, collecting 3 cases from every country. And probably our representatives, we can take care of this and really do the small leaflet. And this might also lead us forward. We can put in this leaflet, we can put in the context of people who are working in this field, doing a research or actively designing or managing such projects. And this might be a beginning of a very nice cooperation line inside our Baltic Sea region. And I think this is also very practical and very useful trend. So then, thank you all for participating. I think we are keeping the live streaming record on YouTube. You can all the time, you can always go back to it and look at the presentations or contact any speakers by email or in whatever other possible way. We are still organizing our seminars in a remote way. I think we have learned that skills very well, and when the situation allows, probably we will organize live meeting as well. But I think keeping the hybrid model is also good, that those who cannot travel can watch our meetings and our discussions online. That is also good. So thank you all presenters, thank you the moderators, thank you the audience, thank you for your questions, for your advices, and wish you very best during the weekend. Take care and be healthy and safe, and we'll meet again. Follow our information. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Have a good weekend, everybody.